so nice to have you too.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Could you give me a brief description, Doug, what you've been working at True North Health Center for 30 years, I guess?
No, I'm not that old. No. So somebody put some big number up there at once and like trying to give me a bunch of credit. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not that old. No, all right, fair enough. I started there in 1998. So 20 years there, basically. And so, we're still connected. I just talked to Alan this morning. Things are going well there. But Dr. Howk and I, Dr. Howk also was a speaker there and did counseling there. But we now are essentially exclusively doing our own work with esteem processes and what we call esteem dynamics. Mm-hmm. And I certainly also, work with the McDougall program and et cetera. And we're happy to keep a look in on what True North is up to.
When did you meet Jen and how did that work?
Well, go ahead, Jen. You introduce yourself to the folks.
Yeah. So I had been sort of watching Dr. Lisle's work from afar. I was interested in the plant-based world, and I was trying to finish my dissertation at the same time. So the dissertation is sort of how you complete your Ph.D. program, in my case, in political science. And I was working on a project that had a lot of overlap with some of the things that Dr. Lisle is intellectually interested in as well. And so I reached out to talk to him about some of those things. About, God, how long ago was it, Doug? Like 4 years ago?
2.5 years ago. Yeah.
And we started having really intellectually fulfilling conversations about human nature and what really motivates people and what blocks people from accomplishing their goals, and around weight loss and just a variety of topics. And pretty soon I am very high in openness on the Big 5 personality spectrum, which we can talk about today if people are interested. And he mentioned that there might be some jobs opening up at True North Health Center, and maybe I should think about moving to Santa Rosa. And so I packed my dogs and my little tiny car and everything that I owned, and I drove. I was living in Olympia, Washington at the time, which is very close to where I am back now, and just headed down to Santa Rosa and worked at True North for a couple of years.
Oh, wonderful. Doug, what is the pleasure trap? I know your work is so famous and wonderful, but
sure.
Can you explain?
What the pleasure trap is it's what happens when a modern innovation bumps up against a natural tendency in an animal. So the natural tendency in, for example, in moths is to fly to light. They're designed to do that because they're designed to fly to celestial objects like the moon. And so they'll fly up, 100 feet or so. And then once they do that, they've sort of done stage 1 of an important journey. And then stage 2 of the journey is to, smell around for pheromones for either mates or food, etc. So then they fly to wherever they're going to fly to, and then they'll go back and fly to the moon again. They'll use a reverse angle technology inside of their brains that will then take them to where they started if they want. So this is an example of a natural tendency in an organism. It's already built in there in order to optimize its ability to survive and reproduce. But if you turn your porch light on like I will do sometimes, I'll open up the door in the morning and there's 20 dead moths at the bottom, sitting on my porch. And what happened was, I've tried to do that. Then later at night, I shut my porch light off for exactly that reason. But when I forget, there they are. And the reason is that the light bulb on my porch is vastly brighter than the moon. And as a result, they are drawn to it like a magnet. And not only that, they can get there and they'll hit it. And when they hit it, then they're disoriented and they start to flutter to the ground, and then they'll get their equilibrium again, and then they'll come right back and they'll hit it again. And then they'll hit it again. And then they'll hit it again. And then they'll hit it again for 7 hours until they're exhausted and injured, and then they die. Okay? So this is an example of the pleasure trap. In other words, they are being drawn to something that they were designed to do, but they are being sucked in by what we're going to call a supernormal stimuli. Okay, this is precisely what heroin is. So heroin causes the same storm of endorphin that takes place when you have an orgasm. Okay, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same neurochemical bath. And so as a result, if someone tries it, they are in deep trouble because it's now they have a supernormal. It's not just the same chemical bath. It can be 10 times as intense. So now it's like, well, gee, I wonder what that's like. You know, if anybody listening, you know, don't go find out. This is a big problem. Very many of these very potent drugs are literally one trial addictions because they are super normal and they capture the motivational system because they're signaling that they're of incredible biological value. Okay. So the modern food supply is the most widespread pleasure trap that there is. So it is the food is no longer natural food. It's been pulled apart artificially, and it's been put back together in ways that make it extremely concentrated calorically, and by the use of sugar, fat, and salt. Those three chemicals make the food vastly more calorically dense than it was designed to be by nature. So as a result of that, people are very much like moths to the light. They actually behave very similarly to moths to the light. They hit the thing, they feel a little sick to their stomach when they have 4 Dunkin' Donuts. They feel a little sick, they go away, and then a little while later, they come right back.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is the pleasure trap. The trap is that it seems like you're doing the right thing, but you're actually being self-destructive. And the problem is not inside of you as a result of any psychological disturbance inside of you. The problem is that you have your natural self placed inside of an artificial environment that you weren't equipped to make good decisions. So Jen and I's discussion over the years has been about how confused the modern psychological analysis is of this self-destructive process. To us, the self-destructive process is actually amazingly straightforward. To everyone else, they want to blame their traumas. They want to blame
they do.
So, sure. And
The
that's
childhood trauma. I have to eat this or drink that because I was sexually abused when I was young.
yeah.
So you can't really blame that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of Jen's research was on, exactly that topic from not that specific, but that angle. Go ahead, Jen. Just describe a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, you can be acting out in a response to a traumatic event to try to sort of self-medicate a little bit. So I think a lot of people find themselves in a stressful situation. This again is this disconnect between these things that we have this intuition about and we feel like it must be true because it feels right. So it feels like people are more depressed than they've ever been because we see more people posting about it on Facebook than we ever have.
Right.
And people are standing around the water cooler at the office back when we actually gathered in offices around water coolers, talking about their feelings more often than they used to. But that doesn't make it true. It just means that we have this observational bias because we're seeing more of it. So I think people have this subjective experience that if they're having a hard day, they might want to go eat something. You know, they feel more like they want to kind of self-medicate with some food, and that there's some legitimacy to that because you're going to generate a little nice, you know, flood of good biochemical process by gnawing on some carrot sticks or making some kale chips or anything like that.
Dopamine,
but where that
dopamine.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So, but where that goes awry is where people intersect that desire with pleasure trap food, with this super normal food, with this incredible caloric density that we're not adapted for. So you could be, whether it's because you're having a difficult day and so you're emotionally eating and having a hard time and you're seeking out a little extra dopamine from the environment, you can go stuff your face with lettuce leaves and you're not going to gain weight because of that. So you can emotionally eat, but emotionally eating only becomes a problem when that tendency in human nature meets with the current food environment that we live in, which is full of this hyper-processed, calorically dense food. So the problem is always the food. It's always pleasure trap food. It's not why you're getting into it. You were designed by nature to eat the richest food that you can find in the environment for all the reasons that Doug was explaining. So it's not, you're not doing that out of some sort of pathology or some sort of brokenness in yourself, or you're not trying to heal some unresolved wound. You're just trying to feel better, just like all organisms are always trying to feel better. But it wouldn't be a problem if you only had whole natural food in your environment, but nobody does.
So how does someone avoid the pleasure trap?
The avoidance is really key to the whole game, because you don't get out of it. Nobody fully escapes the pleasure trap, because it's the water that we're swimming in. It is the modern food environment. It's the fact that, you know, anywhere that you go around your daily business, you're going to be bombarded with all of these super normal food cues everywhere that you look. And to make it worse, now we live in this situation where everybody has these apps on their phone where they can order food, you know, in a second, and they can get really hyper palatable, really calorically dense food from the grocery store or from their favorite restaurant or whatever it is. So you don't, like, the idea of permanently escaping the pleasure trap is a little bit of a misnomer. Like nobody really escapes it unless you move to a deserted island somewhere where there is no civilization, and then you kind of give up all the nice things about civilization while you've solved the pleasure trap problem, but you also don't have electricity, you don't have any kind of social ecology, you don't have any internet, you don't have anything that we like about modern life. So it's really a question of managing the pleasure trap and doing your best to kind of control your personal environment as best as you can. And we have lots of different ideas for that, but the central idea is that the only thing that you are in charge of here is what kind of food is in your house, what sort of food are you bringing into your immediate environment on a regular basis, and identifying where your biggest pitfalls are and where you tend to get into trouble, and trying to create blocks around those specific things and those particular triggers that you have, and managing your susceptibility to the pleasure trap on a really individual basis that is specific to you and your susceptibilities. Because the idea that you're going to transcend it completely and escape it like Alan Goldhammer has is really, that's a very rare event in in the species. Alan might be the only one. I like to think of it more as it can't be solved, it can't be cured, but it can be managed.
I have a couple of questions here, Doug and Jen. Kathy wants to know, why haven't we evolutionarily evolved to adapt to the modern environment? Not enough time yet?
There's
no possible way.
It doesn't interfere. Yeah, it doesn't. You only get an adaptation in the species if there's a danger to the reproductive process. So the pleasure trap is not interfering with people's ability to successfully reproduce. It's not taking them out of the gene pool before that happens, and so it's not going to actually have any measurable impact on natural selection processes.
Yeah, the pleasure trap is with us forever. Okay. And not only is it with us forever, it's with us forever in growing different versions. So it's now, the pleasure trap is now social media. Okay, that is another version of it. This is a supernormal stimuli, tickling mechanisms inside the human mind. All of the anything that draws your attention and essentially wastes your life through cheap stimulation. This is what this is. So whether or not it's junk food, or whether or not it's gambling, or whether or not it's pornography, or whether or not it's, you know, endless social media chasing of pseudo-esteem, these are all different mechanisms by which the modern environment is chiseling away and drawing your ability to actually earn, keep your health and your self-esteem and your self-confidence in any kind of normal achievement chain. And so this is, you know, you talk about, are we worse off now? No, we're not worse off now, but we're reaching a point where human life satisfaction, the gains from reducing the miseries, are going to start to not pay off as much as the problems that are going to be created by essentially the artificial realities, both in terms of food, exercise, the ease of life, as well as the artificial stimulations that we now have socially. All of these things are now adding up to a crest of human existence that is now probably going to get, on average, worse.
Oh.
Okay. So that's
it's not like these scientists in the lab who are working on the bliss point of processed food are going to stop that tomorrow. They're getting more and more, not only are they getting more and more sophisticated about engineering food to make it even more attractive and delicious to people, but they're getting better and better at specifically advertising to the very people who are most susceptible to it, because they have more and more data about what you're buying, what you like, I mean, the fact that when I go to Whole Foods, it's linked to my Amazon Prime account, so I can get the little 3-cent discount on my can of tomato paste. I'm letting Jeff Bezos know sort of what kind of groceries I like and what sort of things I buy and how often I buy them, as if he didn't already have enough data from Amazon for that. And all of that gets aggregated into this sort of avatar of who you are and what motivates you, and how can we get you to buy more things. That's all they care about. It's not, as my dear friend Michael Greger says, it's not like they're sitting there rubbing their little sticky fingers together at headquarters at Coca-Cola trying to figure out how to ruin people's lives. They just want to make more money.
Right.
And so they are trying to make more money. All of these algorithms are just trying to drive more eyeballs to their advertising process. And we are caught up in it because we have this profound susceptibility to the pleasure trap. So the food itself is getting more addictive, and they're getting smarter about marketing to us in very specific ways for food, for social media, for whatever it is that wants to ensnare our brainstem. So we have some real challenges in front of us, for sure.
Industry marketing is so powerful, especially in this country. I know in Europe, they're not allowed to advertise the pharmaceutical drugs or bad products. They don't have that. And so we have in the United States a particularly bad issue with industry marketing, making it so enticing to, I mean, I think of the children watching TV and getting these ads about having ice cream cone, you know, with a happy family. I mean, it's all so well programmed, isn't it? It's really scary. Somebody asked me if we're going up, mental health cases are going higher, including suicides, and is this person unmeshed as, and is there a relationship to diet?
I think it's more, first of all, I don't know that there's any particular growth in any of those problems. I think that's number one. I think we have to look at that and we have to question people. My whole life, people have said, oh, this is really growing. It's a growing problem. No, it's not. Let's go check the evidence first. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's going to turn out that you'll see indications so you might look at a legitimate indication, like, for example, increasing use of antidepressant medications. But that's as a result of the doctors being quicker to prescribe it, as it becomes literally the cotton candy of our time. That it's just like, oh, you're having a little problem. You seem a little down today. Would you like some antidepressant? And boom, it's all on the doctor's prescription can in 2 seconds. So this is.
I had one chase me into the waiting room once to say, are you sure I can't prescribe you something? And I'm like, I'm depressed because I just got dumped. Like, I should be depressed. I don't need to be medicated. Don't chase me into the lobby of your facility and with your prescription pad. Like, are you sure you don't want some Xanax? Like, yeah, I'm sure. So yeah, the fact that these things have been prescribed more does not mean that there's more incidence of depression or anxiety in the population. It just means that there are these major incentives at the level of the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industrial complex to prescribe them. Sorry to interrupt you, Doug. I had to rant.
Yeah,
that is amazing, isn't it? Just for a buck, I guess. Joe asked, I know people on a whole food plant-based diet who are very depressed. Who would you recommend? Well, and I'd say Doug or Jen myself.
Well, the truth is that this is what we're trying to do is we understand a great deal about the principles and the dynamics that are actually causing depression. And so Jen and I have formed a library on our website our website is Esteem Dynamics.
Okay.
And incidentally, the name of Esteem Dynamics, it sounds cool, but it actually wasn't meant to be cool. It's meant to be accurate, okay? The concept in the United States in psychology is that your self-esteem is fixed by your experiences in childhood. That is a catastrophic mistake. It is not fixed by your experience as a child any more than your hunger drive is fixed by childhood
That makes
experiences.
sense.
Okay, in other words, your hunger drive is any more than Jen grew up in rural Alaska. Is she cold right now as she sits in her room? No. Okay, your temperature regulation, your hunger, how sleepy you are, how fatigued you feel, how energetic you feel, how in love you feel, these things are dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Life is an inherently a dynamic process. Dynamics isn't meant to be a fancy word, it means change. Okay, dynamics means things change as conditions change. Esteem conditions inside your nervous system change. They are dynamic. They change. They can change from minute to minute. In 1 minute, some football player is the GOAT that just did the bad play that lost the game. 1 minute later, he gets another chance, and now he's the hero. Okay, how he feels and how everybody feels about him can change in 60 seconds. Your self-esteem is highly dynamic. If you are feeling bad about yourself and down on yourself right now, you can feel an awful lot better in 60 minutes from now.
Yeah.
Go after the problem that's bothering you the most, face it, do the best you can, and 60 minutes from now, you will have an internal mechanism that will give you self-respect, or what we also call self-esteem. It won't give you loads of it, it'll give how much you deserve. Okay? So when it comes to depression, depression is the natural result of failure feedback. As Jen said, getting dumped. Okay, and whenever I get dumped in some fashion, I have to put up with some negative feelings inside my nervous system as my nervous system goes through a review of my deficiencies and my competitive, my essentially competitive standing, and that's just natural. If you're a salesman that goes in and you thought that you were going to get a big account and they said, no, we go with your competitor, do you feel fine as you walk out? No. Your self-esteem may be pretty good because you did an excellent presentation and you had prepared for it, but you feel somewhat down because you're disappointed because you didn't get the feedback that you wanted. Depression is not a disease. Depression is a natural feedback system in exactly the way happiness is. Okay? Happiness is a sensation. It's an experience that comes when we've gotten good feedback, and that is also true of depression. So if you're depressed, one of the things that you can do is you can go to our website at Esteem Dynamics, and you can sign up for our Living Wisdom Library, and you can look at a great deal of materials that we have there in order to try to instruct people on their nature and give them some guidance in how it is to approach their challenges in a different way than they might be instructed elsewhere. And in doing so, these are the principles that we use to try to reliably shift people's self-esteem. We want to shift it from, vaguely negative and low self-confidence and not feeling very good, feeling somewhat self-destructive or somewhat guilty or somewhat defeated or somewhat demoralized, to instead a different mindset that comes with feeling like, wait a second, I've got some control over this. You don't have control over whether you will win. You have control over whether or not you feel good about yourself in the process. That you can do, and that's what it is that we are attempting to explain.
Okay, Judy wants to know, how does self-compassion factor into your thinking about our whole food plant-based eating?
Yeah, Jen, might sounds like that's a
sound like a trick question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat, and I'm not familiar with how that particular practitioner, uses those terms. This is sort of one of these things where, sometimes when people talk about, like Doug was saying earlier, when we talk about self-esteem, we mean something really specific. We mean this sort of process of feeling proud of yourself is really the kind of easiest way to think about that. Your self-esteem rises as your pride in your actions related to an important goal, that as that goes up. So I don't know if she's defining it the same way or how she's thinking about self-compassion, but the way I think about it, and I think Doug does as well, is what we were saying earlier about recognize the nature of the trap, recognize that this is not a personal failing, that there's nothing wrong with you for the fact that you know what to do and you just can't do it. This is the phrase that we hear all the time from people. That is the nature of this problem. You know what to do and you just can't do it because you were in a trap, and the trap has hijacked these processes that evolved throughout our entire ancestral history to lead us to do the right thing for every single human generation until about 2 generations ago, maybe even 1 generation ago, depending on where on the planet you live. This is a brand new problem for the species, and so it's not something wrong with you that you can't solve the problem or that you can't escape the pleasure trap. You're not supposed to be able to escape the pleasure trap. So for me, the idea of self-compassion comes into just that meta awareness of the fact that this is not personal. This is I am caught in forces that are bigger than me. This is the sort of everything about my biology that used to help me survive is now sort of turned against me, but that's not my fault. It's the fault of the environment that I'm embedded in. So that gives me a lot of compassion for my own sort of imperfections, and the fact that in any pleasure trap journey, no matter who you're talking to, with 1 or 2 possible exceptions of people we know in this space, but almost everybody is going to have periods of great success, and then they're going to slip a little bit, and then they're going to have more success, and then they're going to slip a little bit. And it's this ebb and flow of this journey throughout the course of your life, where you don't just solve the problem one and done. It's about having compassion for yourself as you find yourself at any given point in that process, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, Jen has a phrase that it just emerged out of her sometime in the last few months. And as soon as she said it, I recognized a diamond, and that is, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
I love that.
Whoa!
Oh, that is
just
beautiful.
That is exactly on target. So we have great compassion for the fact that this is an incredible mess that you didn't ask for and you weren't designed to solve. On the other hand, it is your responsibility. Okay.
Yeah, no one else can do it for you. We can't solve it for you. Yeah.
That's a t-shirt waiting to happen. I just got my another t-shirt. Yeah. Jen, you'll be the first one to get it.
There we go. I always like new branded t-shirts. Bring them on.
I just love that. Really, it makes it doesn't let you off the hook.
Right. It warns you that unfortunately this is simply a battle that you've been handed. And it's like, well, you can do a mediocre job of it, and then you're going to get the mediocre results, or you can fight for it, but we don't expect it to be easy because it goes against your nature. So that really says it all. Not your fault, but it is your responsibility, and that's the uncomfortable, uncompromising reality that we have to deal with.
And it's not easy, and there's no magic solution that makes it, it does get more habitual with time. The more time you spend sort of compliant with a generally whole food plant-based diet, and the less crap you're eating overall, the more just habitual and intuitive it becomes. So it gets easier, but it doesn't mean that you suddenly walk past a Cinnabon and it doesn't smell good to you. Of course it does. It's going to smell good to you forever. You're going to continue to have that impulse to indulge in things that you don't want to, because these are beyond your control. So there's a lot of room for just giving yourself some space to have that experience and suck it up and do the difficult thing anyway, because if you're not going to do that, then you've forfeited the whole game.
Well, except for if you're an alcoholic or a cigarette smoker, I don't find food addictions much different. In other words, just one cigarette, one glass of wine, you're rehooked. Same thing with food, right?
I think that's true for some people. So there's individual.
And some foods.
Yeah, some people, some foods is how we would look at that. Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic, 7 years in recovery, and so I've sort of done a 2-tiered pleasure trap journey, one with food and one with alcohol. And even the foods that are most triggering to me, and there are some that are very dangerous and that I really have to kind of stay away from. It's not the same. It's not going to take me as fully down the rabbit hole of chaos that a glass of wine would. And I know that because I tried to quit alcohol several times before I finally was able to do it for good. And the pleasure trap process is also one of you're always kind of relapsing to some degree and learning about where those limitations are and what you need to exert more rigorous control over in your environment versus what can sneak in a little bit, and maybe it's not ideal, but it's not going to drag you down to hell like a glass of Merlot would for me.
Yeah, I see. I know that I know that if bacon and cheese didn't have all that salt, no one would be able to eat it.
Sure.
They just wouldn't be
Very
able
true.
to eat it. And it's those sugar, fat, and salt thing that just really makes that whole pleasure trap happen, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I think exercise too has something to do with self-esteem. At least I tell my aerobics classes all the time, listen, this is why are you here? And they say, oh, I'm getting a better heart. I'm going to get skinnier, or whatever they tell me. And I said, no, it's your self-esteem is what you're getting here. You are increasing your self-esteem right here with me now. And that's your number one. Don't forget it. Every 6 months, I ask them the same question and they forget the answer. But I keep telling them anyway, because I think that's part of self-esteem, don't you? Self-esteem building.
The self-esteem is earned and then it's lost. So
Yeah.
self-esteem is ephemeral, okay? And so you earn it when you work diligently and do well at something, and then if you flake out, then in other words, it's a dynamic process, exactly like the hunger drug. So that's how it works.
But we shouldn't
Just
be
like in the
we shouldn't be
go ahead.
We shouldn't be using it as an excuse to give up. In other words, if we can't make it this time, we might as well just give up.
Right. Yeah, we don't. In other words, the self-esteem is always there to be earned. It's always there on the table. And when we feel bad about ourselves, or we feel essentially lethargic about self-improvement, it's kind of like feeling overwhelmed in your house when it's just too messy. And you know that interesting feeling. Maybe an organized person has never felt this. Heather McDougall is a superbly organized human being. She has never gotten the joy of what it feels like to have total mess in your life, and then start, and be defeated and depressed and demoralized and bitter and even angry at somebody that might have been an ancillary cause, and then staring at the mess and then starting to fix it. And it's finally starting to fix it. And that feeling that's amazing. 15 minutes in, it's like, okay, I'm rolling. That's the self-esteem mechanism.
Yeah.
Or anytime you've been procrastinating something, like when you were in school and there was a paper due and you procrastinated, when you finally sat down and wrote the thing, you're 10 minutes in, you've written one mediocre paragraph and you feel like king of the world because you're like check me out. Like, I got this, no problem. So it's very much, it ebbs and flows. It's very responsive to immediate feedback. And so but that's the flip side. People feel like when they've lost it, it's gone forever, but it's never that far away. You can always pull it back in.
This all started with Alan. It started in high school, where my dad was a pretty open character intellectually, and he was interested in nutrition for some reason. Had some degree of interest. He had some degree of interest in all kinds of things. So for some period of time, he got interested in nutrition, and so so as a result of that, there was a book that he insisted was the key to the universe, which was called Psychodietetics, by a pair of guys at the University of Alabama named Sharaskin and Ringsdorf. And theirs was the first big statement about hypoglycemia and how terrible sugar is and all that sort of thing. So that was the first salvo. And so I learned from my dad's, domineering over certain personality, that sugar was this terrible thing. And so then I stopped eating that. And then I went over and I told Alan, hey, this is the big truth with a capital T. This is what we have to do. So then he stopped. And then we kind of grandstanded that around our high school. And then Alan got increasingly interested in food. And he then went to work at a natural food store. And there he met a man by the name of all things, Steve Plant. And Steve Plant had been like got a master's degree in horticulture from Humboldt State, which is as granola as it gets in the United States. So
Hampshire
Steve
might be a little more granola, but it's pretty granola.
Pretty close. Yeah. So, at any rate, what happened then is that Steve Plant had been aware of the American natural hygiene writers, particularly Herbert Shelton, and said, "Look, this is the gospel." So Alan read Shelton, and he figured that Shelton was right. And so then Alan told me, "Hey, this is the right path." Amazingly, out of the brief exploration into the topic, within 12 months of Alan working at that store, he lands on Herbert Shelton. And that becomes the compass that is the same compass that I'm holding to this day, literally 40 something years later. So I started becoming vegan at that time. Then I wobbled around for probably 10 years with the inclusion of dairy products because I sort of didn't quite figure out how I was going to eat things without it. But by the time I was probably 30-ish, I was vegan and have been ever since. So this all came about through my dad to Alan, Alan's curiosity to Steve Plant, and Steve Plant to Herbert Shelton, and that's it. After that, everybody else that we've ever learned from or read of is nothing other than filling in the blanks with greater levels of detail and sophistication. So by 1983, I'm one of the first readers of the McDougall Plan because Alan saw to it that I had that book. And the McDougall Plan then, to me, was an extremely convincing, really definitive scientific review of the material at that time. So that I would have been 24 then. So I knew then, even though I didn't quite swallow the whole thing behaviorally, I had swallowed it entirely conceptually. And so that's how that happened. How about yourself, Jen?
Yeah, it was sort of a progression from ethically oriented vegetarianism to eventually veganism that came out of both ethics and health concerns. So I was probably 9 years old and went to the Alaska State Fair with my dad and had this like kind of archetypal moment where I had my sort of rare hamburger that I was munching on, and we had just gone to the petting zoo, and my little child brain suddenly made this correlation that it had never made before. Like, wait a minute, this is a cow, like the little cow that I just pet in the petting zoo, and it was this sort of moment where I was just disgusted and I was just done at age 9 at that moment with the idea of meat. It was really repulsive to me, just at a very profound visceral level. And it's hard to manage vegetarianism when you're a kid growing up in Alaska in the 80s. Like it was, I did the best I could, but I didn't have very sympathetic parents. And but I was sort of vegetarian oriented pretty much from that point forward. And certainly as soon as I started living on my own, was completely vegetarian and ran into a lot of vegans, went to another hippie college, Hampshire College. I saw someone in the comments mention Evergreen, which is sort of the Hampshire of the West. I used to live right next door to Evergreen College, and tons of vegans at Hampshire. It was sort of the first time I had run into the idea of veganism. And this was the 90s. It was still pretty fringy. I was interested, but it seemed like really difficult to pull off, really difficult to manage. And then it was a combination of two things. It was sort of gaining a more nuanced ethical perspective of that intersected with feminist principles around veganism and around sort of the process of inseminating cows and stealing their babies and all of this that goes on that kind of started to affect my consciousness in that direction, and the publication of the China study in 2006. And so those two things happened around the same time. I also read Fast Food Nation, which was real sea change for me, just in really cementing my desire to get out of animal food entirely. But it was it was a book called The Pornography of Meat, if people are interested in sort of the intersection between feminism and veganism, and the China study that really did it for me around 2006.
But she knows, her internal audience knows that she has done an exceptional job at executing an excellent plan. That's what we're interested in. So I'm interested in, this is where one of these very bizarre confusions takes place in human nature. That when people do a sloppy job at things that are important to them, that they skip around problems, they skip steps, they don't actually do things to the best of their ability. When that happens, what happens is that they very often have poor outcomes. And along with the poor outcomes, they also have bad feelings of vague guilt and vague self-disgust. Now, if they go through any kind of conventional psychological analysis, the conventional psychological analysis will very often triangulate on the feeling of self-disgust and self-loathing and et cetera, and guilt. And they will circle those processes as the problem. That you essentially, we have to purge you of those, and you're probably having those because you've had them in the past, and you've had them in the past because you got negative feedback from other people, and therefore your self-esteem was damaged when you were 13 or 8 or some such thing. This is a catastrophic mistake in understanding the nature of self-esteem. Self-esteem is not built from your history. It is earned today, okay? It's the equivalent of how good you feel with a good night's sleep. If you have done a lousy job sleeping for the last week, then you feel lousy as a result of being short of sleep. If you did a lousy job in the last week with respect to your important goals and how well you put effort in, then your self-esteem mechanism feels somewhat disgusted with you. That's not because of your history, deep history. So the feelings that people have so much of about feeling not that good about themselves, not that solid, that feeling is that is a self-esteem signal that's telling you that you're not doing that good a job. And if there's one thing that you're probably not going to do a very good job out of this life, it's going to be eating healthy food. And the reason you're not going to do a good job about eating healthy food is because the healthy food is a supernormal stimuli that is tricking your brain's design, what I call your Stone Age brain, which is the only brain you've got, okay? So it's tricking the Stone Age brain into thinking you're doing the right thing because it's the most tastiest, pleasurable thing. That, at the same time, it's tickling that and luring you into the trap. It is also causing you to have a self-esteem crisis, okay? This, now you start to see how complicated these wheels get and why. So I had worked this out, but I didn't understand a lot of the excuse making and a lot of the essentially the moth hitting of the light bulb and the continued failure. Not until Dr. Jen Howk came along and started to explain to me that all of psychodynamic thought is based on the idea that the reason you're in that trap is because of terrible things that have happened to you in your past, rather than what on earth is taking place in the present. Now, quite frankly, I never paid much attention to it. I knew quite well it had nothing to do with the past, so I was quite ignorant of the nuances of essentially the self-excuse making and the opaque understanding that was going on, and the psychotherapeutic nonsense that was going on. I was vaguely aware of it, but honestly, folks, I didn't pay attention. I went straight forward, like John McDougall, not looking to the left or looking to the right, just go straight forward for what I know is true, and that's all I did. Jen slowed me down and said, "Oh no, you're fighting bigger forces than you know. You're fighting a type of force that extends its way through political economic behavior worldwide." This was an amazing integration. And so this, what I remain interested to this day, as does Jen, we are interested in the self-esteem mechanism of a young person or old person in a village in Alaska that is being told the reason that they're a failure is some BS, when in really what they need to do is they actually need to seize the opportunities that they have in front of them and make the most of it. That's what will change their personal life. And the same thing, that the reason why somebody struggles with making these changes isn't because they are weak, and it isn't because they're stupid, and it isn't because they're unmotivated. They're in a trap. Okay? They're in a trap, and that trap wasn't caused by other people's damage to them, and it's not caused by anything wrong with their nervous system. But what will happen is, because they're in the trap, they will, when they fail, what they will do, if they reach for any help at all, that the diagnosis of the problem will be the self-loathing that they have. But the self-loathing is in fact a signal that is desperately trying to signal you and tell you, hey, you're not doing a very good job. Okay? Whoa, now we've got an interesting problem. So this is the analysis. Self-confidence results from the as a result of the excellent efforts that we make, which first repair our self-esteem and then lead to actually incremental improvements that we can see. When we actually see the incremental improvement, then we increase our self-confidence. Okay, that is the nature of the relationship between self-esteem and self-confidence. Those two things are under assault in one of the most important domains that there is, which is physical presentation to the world. Okay, not to mention health, for God's sakes. So two of the most central values of life, my personal self-presentation to the village in terms of my appearance, as well as my overall control over my health and how I feel physically. How big can it possibly get? Those two things are under a unique historical assault as a result of the pleasure trap. Those two things result reliably in people making attempts and failing, and then kicking over the table and quitting, and then being told that that the reasons are historical a mishmash in their head rather than actually an accurate understanding. The way out of the pleasure trap begins with a recognition and understanding of the self-esteem mechanism and honoring it, okay? And then watching for it. It starts with doing a good job, literally one meal at a time, okay? And then one day at a time. And then after a week, you might actually feel and start to see subtle differences in your physical presentation. In a month, you absolutely will, okay? So this is the journey that Jen and I are interested, and we're interested in essentially lifting the veil of confusion and ignorance around the nature of self-esteem, self-confidence, and human achievement. And so this is what we talk about, and that's what we spend our life doing.
Excellent.
Okay.